When Europe produced hot hatches in the 80s, it was cars like the Renault 5 Turbo and the Ford Fiesta XR2. Great cars that took the regular hatchback and added more power and better brakes. Over in Japan, Honda took a different tack. They crafted a new, very low drag shape for the existing Civic. They also removed a lot of weight. Together with a range of powerful yet efficient engines, they created a car with great handling, acceleration and fuel economy that had more in common with the MG Midget than the MG Metro. Some car journalists heralded it as the future of compact sports cars. So, was the Honda CRX God's gift to small hatchbacks, or did it have its flaws, and what the heck happened with the third generation car? This is the Honda CRX story. The 1972 Honda Civic was a big success. Launched just before the fuel crisis, its peppy fuel-efficient engines and space for four made it a 1970s version of the Mini, good, cheap transportation. It was reliable. With a hatchback it was a lot more practical, and low Japanese wages made it cheap. It was just what the doctor ordered. So it was natural that Honda wanted to grow the range to sell even more cars. The first generation became a 5-door estate as well as a 5-door hatchback with a wider rear opening. There was a 5-speed gearbox for better fuel economy and larger engines. Honda also sold a sedan, but this was really a hatchback with a small boot opening like the Mini. The second generation Civic sedan or saloon gained a proper boot. Honda had tried sporty versions of the Civic as far back as 1974 with the Civic RS, a Japan exclusive. RS is a common sporting term now, but not so in 1974, so rather than rally sport, Honda said it stood for road sailing. Maybe they felt that the 1.2 litre engine needed a sail to assist it to get decent acceleration, which it certainly did. Things got more angular with the third generation Civic, again as a hatchback, saloon and estate. But one obvious category was missing, a coupe. So in 1983, Honda also introduced the CRX. One thing that struck many people about the car was just how small it was. It was shorter than the Civic with 180mm shaved off the wheelbase. It also had a very aerodynamic shape that bore a similarity to the Alfa Romeo Junior Zagato, and it's maybe no surprise that the designer of the CRX was a proud owner of that very car. The car was at the start a Japan exclusive, sold as the Honda Ballard Sports CRX. Honda had actually wanted to use the CRX name without a dash in Japan, but that combination of letters was already registered as a trademark to another company. The shape with recessed door handles gave the car a great drag factor for the time of 0.33. When allied to a new 1.3 litre EV1 engine, it gave the car good performance, a 10.6 second 0 to 60 time. But what was more surprising was the 56 miles per gallon fuel economy. Who said you couldn't have your cake and eat it? There was the option of a larger fuel-injected 1.5 litre engine that got the 0 to 60 time down below 9 seconds, but it also returned excellent fuel economy. Part of the secret to these figures were the car's weight. Some versions were just 760 kilos. And all this fun was allied to a 5-speed manual with ultra slick and satisfying gear changes, or you could of course ruin the whole thing with a Honda-matic 3-speed auto. But it was clear that Honda really knew how to make good engines.
Honda would like to make a point about the new car. It goes an EPA estimated 51 miles per gallon, 67 highway. It's the #1 gas mileage car in America, period. The new Honda Civic CRX. The longest distance between 2 points.
The Ballard Sports CRX came to the West as the Civic CRX with the dash removed between the R and the X. The new Civic line had gone all angular just as European manufacturers were starting to round off all the edges with cars like the Ford Sierra, so there were some that weren't a fan of the looks of the superbly styled bodywork, as Honda's marketing team put it. They also found fault with the fit and finish. There were flaws with the paint, and the lightweight side panels felt too cheap and flimsy. The mix of power and economy went down well in North America and Europe, but feelings about the handling were mixed. Motorweek compared it to a go-kart, but not in a positive light. They felt they were being thrown around the car. Slowing down wasn't for the faint of heart either. There was a tendency to swerve under hard braking. But under the right hands, the CRX could be a riot to drive. This was minimalist fun for a knockdown price. No wonder Motor Trend magazine named it 1984's Import Car of the Year. The car might be tiny on the outside, but like the 2007 Fiat 500, a large amount of that space was given over to the front seats. That meant that even large people had enough room, although with bucket seats that weren't infinitely adjustable, some found it hard to get comfortable. There might not be a lot of headroom, but those who opted for the sunroof didn't have to suffer. This was what Honda called the world's first electric outer slide sunroof. The panel rose up outside the car to save headroom, something surprising in 1983 but commonplace today. In the back was a tiny bench seat only suitable for kids, and some versions didn't even have that, just a place to store things. But when the back seats were folded down, it turned into a surprisingly practical little car. There was even space for additional storage. Honda called the instrument panel functionally laid out, but American TV show Motorweek begged to differ when it came to the HVAC controls, as they said,
"You'll be able to see them easily once you remove the steering wheel."
But the main controls were clear and easy to use, and it was good to see air conditioning as an option on such a small and inexpensive car. Honda also offered an ever so helpful economy driving indicator light to tell you just how to get the best fuel economy from that efficient 1.3 litre engine. A year later, Honda launched the CRX SI, SI standing for Sequential Port Injection, a system we were told was similar to that on their Formula One engines. Over in Europe, it was known as the more level-headed 1.6i16, but whatever it was called, the 0 to 60 time was now under 8 seconds. Honda added a sporty rear spoiler, and many of the optional extras were offered as standard to justify the higher price. The SI also showed Honda was listening to feedback. The new car was tested by Motorweek and they found the rear end instability under braking had been fixed. The new CRX was now a safer car to drive. There were a few minor changes in 1985, such as flush-fitting headlights and optional power steering, but soon the second generation CRX launched in 1987. The car might look very similar and it might look smaller, but it was actually longer with a wheelbase that grew 100 millimeters. Honda were proud of the pillars that shrank to give better visibility, and there was an extra pane of glass in the boot to try to aid rear visibility. In my experience, having that large bar just in your eyeline makes it almost impossible to see anything useful out of the back. But to be fair, I've never actually driven a CRX, so let me know how it was in the comments. The track was widened both front and rear for better handling, and with completely revised suspension, this promised to be even more fun than the original car. But was it as fast? After all, the car had put on 60 kilos. But Honda had an answer. The drag was further reduced from 0.33 to 0.29 on the HF high fuel efficiency model, and the engine performance improved with very little impact on fuel economy. That meant the new top-of-the-range aluminium 1.6 litre with its bonnet power bulge could now get to 60 in around 7 seconds. Honda once again compared the CRX's engine to the ones they'd made for Formula One, and in 1987 they had something to shout about. They powered the top 3 constructors that year. Honda really knew how to make good engines. The outside might look similar, but the dashboard was completely different, benefiting from the updates to the Civic. There was a more logical layout and the HVAC controls were much easier to reach. If you had to go for an automatic, at least there were 4 gears now instead of 3. Braking was better as well, with ABS as an optional extra. In the 1980s, it wasn't common to get a car with an almost completely glass roof, but Honda offered just that on the Japanese CRX. Reviewers loved the new car. Motor Trend once again crowned it Import Car of the Year. Road and Track declared the SI one of the best value high-performance cars. Rather amusingly, they also called out the Civic hatchback as the best sedan under $7,500. In 1989, Honda launched their first car with a VTEC or valve timing electronically controlled engine, the Integra XSI. The very next car was the CRX. VTEC was all about getting the most out of the engine. The camshaft had 2 or more profiles which allowed the engine to sip fuel when you were light on the throttle and give you more power when it was being driven hard. The upshot was that the 1.6 litre 158 horsepower engine could get to 60 in under 7 seconds, but still delivered great fuel economy. Like the first car, you could have your cake and eat it, only this time you could have even more cake. The all-new 5th generation Honda Civic launched in 1991 without a mention of the new CRX, and fans got worried. Had Honda abandoned the sporty hatchback? Well, yes and no. They'd been busy behind the scenes creating a car that could face mounting Japanese competition. Toyota had launched the MR2 in 1986, too late for Honda to react with their 2nd generation car, and Mazda cornered the market for fun roadsters with the MX-5 in 1989. Honda's new CRX was aimed at beating both of these cars in a very different style. And so the CRX Del Sol was launched in 1992 with a look some compared favourably to the new Lexus SC. In Europe it was known only as the CRX, but in North America the CRX name was dropped completely. It would simply be known as the Civic Del Sol. And Del Sol, or of the Sun, was the main focus of the new car with the new electronic Targa top. Where the MR2 had removable panels and the MX-5 had a bulky hard top you had to store in your garage, the new Del Sol's party piece was removing the panels without having to get out of the driver's seat. As this Japanese video shows, it was very clever, but involved lots of annoying beeping.
次にルーフセンターハンドルをオープン側にします。再びスイッチを押すとルーフがトランクリッドの中に収納され下がり始めます。トランクが降り切る前に安全上2回自動的に止まります。
A consequence of this design meant that the boot also had a very cool way of opening. This was all fine, of course, until the battery died, so there was a backup solution, a hand crank to operate the roof mechanism. If your finances couldn't stretch to an electronic roof, Honda offered a manual version, but even though it was light, only 11 kilos, they recommended 2 people remove it, which wasn't that great if you were driving on your own. But it stowed away cleanly in the boot, and even with that roof stored, you still had double the boot space of the MX-5. When the electric side and back windows were lowered, this delivered a rather nice open-top experience. Inside it was all new, again using Civic parts to good effect. There were more features as well, such as central locking, as if you needed it on a small car with only 2 doors, a driver's airbag, electric mirrors, the all-important cup holders, traction and cruise control. That was all great, but there had been compromises in the name of fashion. The engines were largely a carryover from the previous car, and the Del Sol was heavier with more drag, so either performance or fuel economy were going to suffer. And if you wanted to listen to music, be prepared for low-speed cruising, as the sound system wasn't able to drown out loud wind noise. The handling also took a step back. On the slalom test there was body roll and the rear slid about with front end plough. The brakes tended to lock up under hard braking, so ABS was definitely something to choose. And the gear shifts didn't seem quite as satisfying as on the old car. Comparisons Honda was making to its Formula One cars and the new NSX seemed a tad more tenuous. The Del Sol seemed to be a car for cruising rather than hard driving. To previous CRX customers, the choice was clear. If they wanted a cool open top, they should pick the better handling MX-5. If they wanted practicality with CRX performance, then the Civic Si was the way to go. But then again, I remember test driving that car way back in 1995 and came away feeling that the small boost in power wasn't worth the extra $2,000, and I plumped for the lower spec Civic DX. But in any case, the 1992 Del Sol didn't seem to offer many benefits. There were a few tweaks to the car over its lifetime, such as dual airbags and the removal of the auxiliary headlights, but the car remained largely the same. Sales of the Del Sol must have disappointed as production ended in 1998 without a direct replacement. The MX-5 had claimed another victim. Honda produced the more expensive S2000 that was a great car, but it didn't provide the cheap thrills and practicality of the original CRX. There was a comeback of sorts in 2010 with the CRZ, but if you were looking for the same thrills as the original car, you'd be disappointed. There was a sport mode, but the car couldn't get to 60 in under 9 seconds, and fuel economy wasn't anything to write home about despite it being a hybrid. Honda even made the same mistake as the second generation CRX of splitting the rear window into 2 panels, and reviewers complained that they couldn't see anything useful out of the back. If you're looking for something similar today, there's a Civic Type R. It's got more than enough performance, 325 horsepower and a healthy dose of practicality, but also poor fuel economy, and the shape doesn't exactly scream excitement. There's rumours of a new tiny EV sports car, but this is supposed to be an open top to once again try to topple the Mazda MX-5. Many have tried, none so far have succeeded. Purists dismiss the Barbie girl CRX Del Sol and hark back to the 80s when the CRX was at its best. The 90s car was certainly clever, but Honda was by then a very different company. They were moving up market and growing out of their adolescence, producing a car that was much more level-headed. The first 2 CRX generations were a great combination of power and economy, yet enough modern convenience and practicality to make this your everyday car, and all this for less money than it had a right to be. Car companies don't make cars like this anymore. I'm not sure they can once you've added all the modern safety protections. They'd be too heavy. But Honda found a great trade-off between size, weight and power to create something truly special, and we should all celebrate Honda's genius. I go in depth about the genesis and domination of the MX-5 on the right, and there's also a video about a very different Honda sports car, the NSX. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.